Hi there, I'm Sara Sheehan, and welcome to my podcast, Transformational Thinkers with Sara Sheehan. Today I'm joined by Kevin Wilkins, CEO of Trepwise, a New Orleans-based strategy firm who has collectively worked with over 550 purpose-driven organizations. Kevin found his greatest impact serving nonprofit, foundation, and public-private spaces with one goal in mind: developing thriving and equitable communities nourished by good ideas. Kevin is a graduate of Dartmouth College and holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. He has held executive leadership positions with Procter & Gamble, Fidelity Investments, and State Street Research and Management. Kevin, I am so glad to be chatting with you today and to have you on my show. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate being here.
Wonderful. And so, Kevin, I'd love to hear from you what led you to and motivated you to create your business.
So that probably requires just some additional background. First of all, thank you for sharing my bio, so I won't dwell on that too much. The one headline from my bio that was not there is that I married a woman from New Orleans, and that will become relevant in a few minutes. But apparently when you marry someone from New Orleans, you do end up living in New Orleans at some point in your life. It just took us 28 years to get here. We met in college many years ago, and we spent most of our married life in New England. So I started my career in packaged goods at Procter & Gamble, as you mentioned, and then I went to Harvard Business School and transitioned into financial services. What I learned at Procter & Gamble was just tremendous and transforming for me. They really invest in training. They really invest in helping you understand what it means to run a business. So I was able to do that as part of their brand management program, and I really, really liked it. I was in the household cleaning division, and I was 22 years old. And to be honest with you, household cleaning was not the biggest passion of my life. But I learned a lot about how one manages and how one engages with consumers and how you get some insights and how you can do the marketing, the finance, and all the manufacturing behind the scenes. So it was really very, very interesting work. I just didn't love the category. So when I went to Harvard Business School, I got exposed to the financial markets, and I really was intrigued by them. I thought they were very dynamic. And I liked what I did at Procter. Can I do my general management concept? But instead of household cleaners, let's talk about the financial market. So that's what led me to Fidelity Investments, as you mentioned. And then that began a 20-year path for me in financial services, which was interesting because every time I went back to Harvard Business School, people would say to me, "Oh, you're still in financial services?" I'm like, yeah, like somewhat surprised. I was more the marketing guy, maybe. I was more the creative, so I don't think people saw me in that space. But I really did enjoy it. And again, I was like running organizations within financial services. I was often doing innovation and product development. I was doing some change management work. So it really allowed me to leverage a lot of general management skills. And 20 years later, there I was, still in financial services. And I reflect on that, actually. But 20 years later, I was president of an organization that we ended up selling to a larger organization in financial services in New York. And at that point, my time at financial services kind of paused. And I was reflecting on my time and realizing that I was put on a path right out of school. You know, I went to the right company. I went to the right business school. I ended up going to the other right company. I always linked to big brands. Although that wasn't necessarily my intent, that's just kind of where I ended up. And I knew what to do to be successful. So you're on a path and they tell you to get to the next level, you need to do A, B, C, and D. So, you work hard, you excel, and you do your best. And if you do well, you can continue to pursue the path. And 20 years later, I'd reached a pinnacle on the path. But what I began to realize was this path was given to me. And I made decisions to stay on the path. But in order to stay on the path, you had to do A, B, C, and D. And I did A, B, C, and D and was able to succeed. I didn't really think through the choices I'm making in my career. I was on a career path. I followed the rules and I did well. And 20 years later, I was still in financial services. And that's when you pause and say, whoa, what just happened? And I reflect on this phase of my life, and I benefited, and it was really I enjoyed my time. I don't want to minimize that. I did enjoy the time. I did enjoy the people I worked with. I enjoyed what we were able to accomplish. But at the same time, maybe it wasn't as intentional as I would have wanted it to be. I believe that it's really important when you're managing your own career. And I say this, I've got 3 children, and I say this to each of them. You want to make sure you're making the right choices for you in any given moment. And you need to make sure that you're not being dictated by others in terms of what you need to do to succeed, but you're instead like making choices around what you feel you need to do to succeed. I think many people, maybe of my generation, maybe less so in this generation, find themselves on these paths kind of unintentionally. And 20 years later, there you are.
Mhm.
And, I joke about like midlife crises. Maybe this is why people have midlife crises, because they begin to realize that they really haven't made many choices in their
Mhm.
careers. And they stick to what they know, and they stick to what they're good at, and they just follow the rules and they get to a certain level. I share that with you because when we moved to New Orleans in 2010, everything shifted for me. My wife, as I said, is from New Orleans. The transaction had happened with the firm that I had been at, so I had some flexibility to do different things. My wife is a professional fundraiser in the university setting. She was raising money for Harvard for many years, and she got a phone call from Tulane. And Tulane was curious in terms of whether she would consider raising money for them. Never had she gotten a headhunter call from Louisiana, let alone New Orleans, let alone Tulane. So all of this was something that would really be good for her career and her choices.
Mhm.
They're like, is it time? Is it time? We've been in Boston for over 20 years. We loved it there. We didn't have family there, so you kind of build your own networks. The kids were established. It was a big decision to shift. The one constraint that we didn't have was my career. I could kind of do what I was doing at that time. I was doing some advising work. I was doing some investing work. And I could actually do that
Mhm.
anywhere. So we decided in 2010 to move, packed up the truck, and we moved on down. My boys were 7, 9, and 13 at the time. My 13-year-old said that we were ruining his life single-handedly. Those special parental moments. And we're like, okay, well, let's see if we can find a smile and let's move on down. and then 3 years after being here, he was like, this is the best place to be from. This is the best place to be a teenager. I'm like, yes, in fact, it is. Nevertheless, so it was a very good move for the family and a very good move for my wife's career. And it gave me a moment to ask an intentional question. And that question is, what do I want to do? My wife asked that right when we decided to move. She's like, what are you going to do? What do you think about doing? Do you want to do early retirement? You can do some volunteer stuff. I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't sit. No, I don't think so. Way too young. Not going to do that. But I'll explore and maybe I'll see what I want to do.
Mhm.
But what was interesting is never did it come to me, never in my consideration set did I say, I wonder what I can do in financial
Mm.
services. Instead, I said, I wonder what I can do to maybe help the community in a post-Katrina world. So we moved here 4.5 years after Katrina. And the city had made progress, clearly, but still had a lot of recovery to do. The
Mhm.
money was drying up, the cameras had all gone away. And suddenly the city is faced with some challenges around how can we sustain momentum? How can we continue to recover? Now, the good news is a lot of people moved to New Orleans after Katrina,
Mhm.
really wanted to come and help the city. A lot of money flowed into New Orleans after Katrina. A lot of nonprofits were built. A lot of social services were put in place. And a lot of really, really well-intended people wanted to come here and help the city. Unfortunately, when I got here, as I said, the cameras had all gone away. And I was seeing a city that had a lot of nonprofits that were established, but perhaps they were all chasing the same money. And some of them maybe would not be sustainable.
Mhm.
So I began exploring the city. Like, what does the community need? What kind of impact can I make?
Mhm.
And I started in what I call the incubation and acceleration space. So a lot of money had come into New Orleans to help fund organizations to help startups get off the ground.
Mhm.
So I worked for a few organizations that were helping entrepreneurs get their ideas off the ground. And the idea was if we could build different companies within the New Orleans ecosystem, we would then help create jobs and we would help build out a middle class because New Orleans really did not have a strong middle class as part of its community design. So how can we create more industry that would create more jobs?
Mhm.
That's interesting. I think I can understand how to build companies. I can help with that. And I began building curriculum out. I began teaching. I taught at Tulane as an adjunct for a few years and really was diving into how to help entrepreneurs get their organizations off the ground. And there were several type of incubators in the city. Some were for-profit, some were nonprofit, but they both had the same idea. How can we get these organizations off the ground
Hmm.
in generating jobs? Okay. What I noticed, though, is that there were not a lot of organizations that could help these companies or these organizations stay off the ground. So I joked that Louisiana was very good at launching ideas. We need to help these organizations sustain and grow their
Hmm.
ideas.
Staying in business is definitely harder than many people plan for.
100%, because everyone focuses on the launch,
Right.
right? And get it off the ground. It's so exciting.
Hmm.
Uh, we have to talk about year two and like year three and what that looks like.
Hmm.
And what was interesting is I met with the Greater New Orleans Foundation, which is a fantastic organization in the city, really a community foundation that's doing transformational work. And when I met with them, I was around 10 years ago, right before I started Trepwise. And they wanted me to look at some of the nonprofits that they had been funding. And they wanted to get my perspective on like, what's it going to take to make them sustainable?
Hmm.
And I said, well, listen, I've sat on boards before, but I'm not like a nonprofit leader of any kind. I'm more of a business background. And they're like, exactly. We want to have a business acumen placed against this nonprofit structure. And the light bulb went on. Like, isn't that interesting? If I could help these nonprofits really put together a plan to sustain themselves and grow their impact, wouldn't that be great for the community?
Hmm.
And my background is actually pretty well suited. Like I know how to run organizations, I know how to grow organizations. You have to familiarize yourself with the operations of a nonprofit and how the fundamentals work, but not rocket science. And it was just really interesting to see the diversity of ideas and the diversity of purpose that existed within New Orleans.
Hmm.
If I was able to help just one of these organizations do well, then it would have been worth the trip. So I talk about intentionality because for the first time, it really wasn't about me. Like my career was about me. Let me be clear. Like when I was in financial services, it was about me. What was my title? What was my role? What was my responsibility? What was my stature? It was about me for the good and the bad. And in New Orleans, it really wasn't about me. It was about the community. It was about the needs of the greater whole. And it's about how can I help contribute and wander into places that if you told me that I was going to start helping nonprofits grow their impact, I'd be like, okay, well, what education do I have to do that? But when you wander your way into something because you're curious, because you're making intentional choices, because you've asked yourself the question, what do I want to do? What do I really want to do? What is the impact? What is the legacy that I'm looking to build here? Then the outcomes tend to be maybe slightly
Hmm.
different.
Definitely. Well, that's a wonderful way to frame the time that led up to you creating Trepwise. Can you share with me what lessons you have learned from building and scaling Trepwise so far? I'm sure there are many.
Yeah, it was. I've learned a whole lot. I've heard a whole lot. First of all, I never really intended to build this type of consulting organization. When I started Trepwise, it was more of what can I do to help support these specific nonprofits that I've been working with. I need some support behind me. I started Trepwise with the idea that we can help purpose-driven organizations, but I wasn't really thinking about the scale, and I wasn't really thinking about the breadth of work that we could be doing. It was literally in the moment I had a lot to do. So I'm going to start a company to help me do this. I'm going to hire someone who can help support me. Well, 10 years later, there are 15 of us. We've got subject matter experts that we work with, which would make us a larger organization as well, that we do that as contractors. And we're working with not only nonprofits at a national level, but we do strategic planning work for the nonprofits. We do systems planning work, helping organizations work together to solve a common challenge. And then we do a lot of organizational effectiveness work, like how can we strengthen what you have and how can we maximize what you do? So those three areas started in New Orleans. And I say I built this for New Orleans and will always be for New Orleans. But having this national platform right now and working with nonprofits from around the country has been so fulfilling. I think one of the first lessons was do not limit yourself. Don't limit yourself. Don't say like, oh, I can only do a few nonprofits right now and we'll see how that goes. Think big. Think about what you can do to really maximize your impact and think about how you can perhaps scale yourself. And that was the question that I was dealing with early on. How do I scale me? And my team often laughs at me because I would ask the question, is Kevin bigger than Trepwise or is Trepwise bigger than Kevin? As kind of like a bellwether. And the answer often was Kevin's bigger than Trepwise. People come here because of Kevin and he's helping these organizations. Well, 10, 11 years later, Trepwise is much bigger than Kevin. We have clients that I have never met. We have work that perhaps I wouldn't even know how to do specifically, but I've built an incredible team to actually do this type of work. And you stay on point. So the other lesson I've learned, like number one, don't limit yourself. Number two, stick to your vision, stick to your mission, and stick to your values. And if you can really stick to your values and live your values every single day, then you're going to continue to do the next right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Also very much of a human-centered firm. So what that means is we understand who the stakeholders are for any given opportunity that we're working on. And we want to understand kind of what their perspectives are, what are their needs.
Mm-hmm.
We do that with all of our clients. So when you're working with a nonprofit, you talk to staff, you talk to board, you talk to funders, you talk to the beneficiaries of the nonprofit because you want to understand what exactly is working and where some of the challenges are. And you want to get the full picture of it
For
all.
sure.
And then everything you do is human-centered in terms of what's driving you.
Mm-hmm.
So what I often say is lesson 3 or 4, do not fall in love with your own ideas. Do not fall in love with what you're doing. Stay consistent. So consistently show up and do what you do and stay agile. Listen to what the clients are really saying. Listen to the diversity of stakeholder voices that are really important. And if you can do that for yourself, just as much as we do it for our clients, that's the huge win.
Mm-hmm.
So continue to evolve this team as we continue to strengthen our team and to deepen our team's talent. As we got larger engagements, as we got larger systems work, it was all like a very logical set of choices we were making as a firm. The pandemic changed everything for us in many ways. One, it really helped us help the community because the community was in crisis. New Orleans is a tourism town.
For sure.
80% of revenue for tourism. So suddenly the pandemic hits and hotels and restaurants and the layoffs and the musicians and the cultural economy. I mean, it was all so challenged.
For sure.
So we were able to take that moment and we did a ton of pro bono work. We're like, listen, we're going to help you. We're going to stay focused. We're going to stay present. We're going to stay the course in terms of what we need to do as an organization. We're going to help these organizations maximize this opportunity of transition.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to make sure these organizations feel like they are supported. And in doing so, we were able not only to help the New Orleans community, but our reputation led us to help other communities as well around the country and helping different nonprofits and different organizations weather this pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be in the hospitality space or, across the board. And when you're facing a huge pandemic, the funders aren't necessarily going to be funding your programming because your programming isn't necessarily happening. So how do we
Sure.
help organizations reimagine how they do what they do in a very uncertain
Well, and there's no question the pandemic really changed the rules for so many people, and hospitality was disproportionately affected,
Yes.
overall. But just take into consideration that there were 1 billion adults globally that were laid off
Yes.
during that time frame, and that data point alone, and that is from the Gallup organization, that is an absolutely shocking statistic that tells you how far ranging the economic downturn from the pandemic really was. And so very, very compelling and interesting. Kevin, I'd love to hear, based on some of your comments, You've talked a little bit about the lessons that you've learned from building your business and the focus that you have in the nonprofit space. I can only imagine from the efforts that you've taken to influence and impact others that you've gotten a lot in return personally for the impact that you've made in your market. Can you share with me what the three most significant things you've gotten in return for the work that you've done with nonprofits?
It's a great question. It is the most satisfying work that I've ever done. And let me be clear, I'm running a small consulting organization. I am not making nearly as much money as I made when I was in financial services. No one has heard of Trepwise until like you begin to get your reputation continues to grow, but it's not Procter and Gamble and it's not Fidelity Investments, let's be clear. So all of those that criteria for me absolutely went away. Yet I've never been happier and I've never been more satisfied with what we're doing. So when I think about impact, I think about seeing our plans come to life and like actually working. I see leaders who we coach in terms for leadership and executive development and professional development. I see them thriving and I see them making choices and I see them giving credit to what Trepwise has done in order to help support them. And I think maybe some of our biggest impact has been not only working within organizations to maximize their impact through planning work or through organizational effectiveness work, and to see organizations transform themselves, but I've also seen the impact of organizations working with each other. And we have an interesting seat because we work with a lot of different organizations, both locally and nationally. And we've been able to introduce different organizations to each other to kind of combine efforts to make even a bigger impact.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen, and I didn't actually see it coming, to be honest with you. Again, you need to be intentional. You need to make the choices. We do a lot of systems work, and systems work is how can we address a community need collectively to ensure that we can get the outcomes that we're striving for, and we are stronger together than we are alone.
Mm.
So an example of that would be a plan that we did for the state of Louisiana 2 years ago called Whole Health Louisiana. And what we did is how can we address childhood adversity across the state? Let's understand what childhood adversity looks like. Let's talk about what trauma means. Let's understand what we need to do to identify trauma and childhood adversity. What do we need to do to help address it? And what do we ultimately need to do to help prevent it from happening going forward? Well, if you think about it, we worked with over 100 organizations together, funded by the First Lady's office of the state. So it was not a political office, it was the First Lady's Foundation, actually, Donna Edwards. And we worked over a 2-year window to kind of understand the space, understand the players, understand outcomes that we'd be looking for collectively, understand who would play what role within the system, understand the system leverage points that need to be shifted and need to be addressed, and then see it come to life. So, and that is the work I am most proud of. I mean, if we can help move the needle in Louisiana when it comes to childhood welfare, that is like a win beyond a win.
Mm-hmm.
And people were in a room talking with each other, and we were facilitating conversations, and we were designing experiences where people could work together to come up with common solutions, was so 100% satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've done the Youth Master Plan for New Orleans. How can we help opportunity youth create pathways to success? We are doing the Vision of New Orleans plan. What is New Orleans going to look like in 2035? Because of the work we've done here, we did the Cultural Economy Plan in Houston. I often say New Orleans is a fantastic incubator because they've got lots of new ideas here, and we're very strong in culture, and we're very strong in the arts, and we've got a lot of youth that need support. And if you can manage it in New Orleans, you can manage it in other cities as well.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I didn't really think this way when I started. I was like, I just want to see if I can help the community. I want to see if I can help these organizations. And I loved what we did so much. It just continued to
Mhm.
grow and hiring
And
into.
so it sounds like some of the things that you really got in return were some incredible opportunities to dive into areas of interest that had even more impact in the
Correct.
community and the state.
The collective impact work was
Very
the most,
interesting and compelling.
yeah,
That's fascinating. And so I know that you are in the process of writing a book on intentionality, which is a very compelling and interesting leadership topic. I was wondering if you could share with me what your book's through line is.
so the idea is defining what an intentional career really is and understanding like the pathways that you are on and the choices that you are making and ensuring that you are moving in a direction that you personally really want to move into and that you can control what you choose to do in your life. And the minute you shift to an intentional concept, the more satisfied you're going to be, the more ownership you're going to feel, and the real outcomes that you're looking for are personal. Like you feel like you kind of own your path and you can own the outcomes that you're able to achieve. It's not about the brand you're linked to. It's not about your title. It's not about your money. Those are all nice trappings. That's fine. I'm not going to minimize the importance of that in terms of people's ability to live a full life. And I don't want anyone waking up one day and say, I've been on this path for 20 years. And the path can go away. So if you're not intentional and you are living by someone else's rules and you just keep doing the next right thing on this path and you keep excelling, fine, the path can go away. So, for example, in my situation, when we had the transaction with the firm in New York City, that was it. Like I stayed on for a little while, but I wasn't moving to New York City. And that was it. Like that path kind of had a moment and it stopped, right? And I could have like hustled to get another job on the path, and I could have like jumped back in, without thinking and just keep going to keep focused on what I had been doing. But I didn't want to. Like
Mhm.
I took a moment. I took a moment to breathe. And I think that moment to breathe was the lever to say, you know what? Let me shift it. It's not what they want me to do.
Mhm.
What do I want to do?
Mhm.
So shifting your mindset to intentionality and to choice is so important. And it's never too late. And I actually think the generation of my kids, perhaps, I think they tend to be more intentional. I think they are making choices because they want to do good in the world. And
Mm.
I think this is slightly different with this younger generation. I think they want to work for organizations that are making a difference. Yes, it's a paycheck. And yes, they want to do well and they want to have benefits and all that. And they want to make a difference. And I think
That's very
if we
interesting.
can help this generation really be intentional about their careers and the benefits that come with intentionality, then that's going to be the huge win.
That's fascinating, and very interesting. I'm very interested in exploring the book when it's available. When do you anticipate the book would come out?
The goal is to have it completed in 2025, hopefully halfway through. So the summer of 2025, we're aggressively working on it right
Perfect.
now.
Perfect. That's
Yeah,
not very long at all. That is not long. That is not long. That's very exciting.
it is exciting.
Excellent. And so, Kevin, what are 3 things that you would like to impact most by working with nonprofit clients?
So, are you referring to social impact work, or are you referring to what I want to help a client do?
Well, I'm referring to, like, for instance, could if it were an opportunity of your dreams and you could make a difference in these 3 areas, what
Hmm.
would you
Yeah.
like to do?
So, the good news and the bad news is society is not lacking in social issues, correct?
Correct.
And I love the idea of being able to help move the needle in different spaces. The cultural economy is so important to the fabric of New Orleans. And what you find, you talk about our vision of a thriving and equitable community. Oftentimes, who we call the culture bearers of the city, whether they be the Mardi Gras Indians, whether they be crews that dance in the Mardi Gras parades, often are featured as part of the tourism story, but don't necessarily benefit from the tourists coming here. They don't get compensated, but they draw the people here. So how can we create a system that's so valued within New Orleans and help build out that economy such that all culture bearers benefit from the tourism that comes here?
Mm-hmm.
That is not a unique idea, and that is not a unique issue. There are the cultural assets across other cities that fall into that same area. There's also so much culture here in terms of the types of activities that New Orleans provides. How can we help coordinate that system to ensure that everyone's benefiting and that we're creating a major impact in the tourist space? I really love that work. I value that work. I know culture bearers in the city who are so passionate about this. And I just want to make sure that everyone can benefit from the tourism that comes into this city and the tourism that's generated by other cities as well. Mental health is a huge issue out there, and our youth are suffering. And we did the mental health work supporting Tulane at the university level and put together a significant plan that helps support the mental health challenges of youth within the university. Taking that concept, and we've been applying that to other schools as well, because mental health is so important. So, how can we help maybe move the needle on that space? Food access. So,
Mm-hmm.
food insecurity is a big deal. One of our first systems effort, and I didn't even think of it as a system. I was just like, how can we help these organizations coordinate?
Mm-hmm.
When the pandemic hit, people were going hungry. And the city and FEMA and the Greater New Orleans Foundation came together and said, we need to create a process that all these restaurants that we have, a ton of restaurants that we have per capita, more than any other city in the country, all the food that they had on the shelf,
Mm-hmm.
what can we do to help them make meals and distribute that through a system to the people who needed the most in New Orleans? And how can FEMA help support this? So it was like an economic challenge to say, okay, we need to build a system, although I didn't use those fancy words
Sure.
back then. We just need to help these organizations coordinate.
Mm-hmm.
So we stepped in like we did with a normal organization. Instead of working within an organization, we began working across
Mm-hmm.
organizations. FEMA was involved, and the Greater New Orleans Foundation was involved, and the cities were involved, and the end users were there, and we did it
Those
quickly.
are three really, really compelling areas when you're talking about success of the cultural ecosystem in your market. You're talking about food insecurity is huge, and mental health is absolutely a giant
Right.
area to make a big impact. So those are pretty tremendous. It sounds like that you might have something else on your mind there. You were about to share something else. Was there something else in that space that you wanted to share?
Oftentimes, when I was in financial services, you were able to say, I did this. I built this organization, or I helped manage this money, or whatever the claim might be. Almost heroic in a way, but not truly by any means. I look at this work that we're doing now, the work that I've chosen to do, and I realize, you know what? We're going to help move the needle. We are not going to solve this problem, and we need to be okay with that.
Mhm.
We need to be okay with the idea that we're here to help coordinate. We're here to help maximize the impact of any given organization. And we need to be comfortable with the incremental concept, as opposed to be like, I'm going to solve world hunger.
Mhm.
That's a fantastic claim to make, and that's a fantastic goal to have. But I think you need to be more realistic with this
Mhm.
work. We need to continue
Right.
to move the needle. We will never ever be done.
Mhm.
And being okay with that. So
Mhm.
it's not about the praise of solving something. It's about the ability to help move things forward.
Mhm. Very much so. Very much so. And so moving something forward and being patient, sometimes you can have an even bigger result if you are patient because
Totally, 100%.
when you move too fast or you're doing something that may not have a good strategy or vision behind it,
Right,
you may not have what I would call a path to success that you
right.
would have if you were just a little bit more patient. It may not be a
Yes,
straight line,
never,
right?
never. Right. And being okay with that is key.
Exactly, exactly. And so I'd love to hear from you, Kevin, if you could influence other businesses or business leaders out in the world to do one thing in the nonprofit sector, what would that be?
It's a great question. I want to go back to my comment about this current generation of workers want meaning in their life. And they want to work with organizations that can provide meaning both through the work they do for the core premise of the organization as well as the social impact it can do. In fact, studies would show that people will take less salary if they feel they're working with an organization that's really trying to do good in the community.
Mhm.
So that's the framing. So there's a motivation for organizations to want to do good. It's not necessarily about the profit that they can make all the time. It's more about that triple bottom line of trying to do some social good at the same time.
Mhm.
So I would encourage organizations to find their passion. What is their philanthropic strategy? Like, what do they want to do to give back? Question number one, do you want to give back? Is that something that is important? Some organizations might be like, no, I gotta focus on other things. But I would argue that baked into your fundamentals needs to be this concept of giving back.
Mhm.
Let's understand what you can do as an organization from a philanthropic strategy. So choose what you want to do and where you want to make a difference.
Mhm.
And then encourage your employees and encourage your leadership team to look at the time, look at their talent, look at their treasure, and see what they can do to help support the issue that you as an organization want to make an impact on.
Mhm.
And then finally, align vision with the actual work. So if your vision is A, B, and C, your vision to reimagine the world if you're a technology company,
Mhm.
cool. Let's reimagine the world. We can use technology. And then maybe we want to create a cultural literacy class that helps individuals learn how to use technology and create pathways for them to maybe build a career in technology.
Mhm.
So you're aligning with your vision, but you are doing something that's really good and strategically in line. That's one approach.
Mhm.
Or you can survey your employee base and say, where is the energy right now?
Right.
Is the energy in climate? Is
Mhm.
the energy in food access? And then build programs around where that energy
Mhm.
is. For Trepwise, we have this program called Trep Work for Good.
Mhm.
And Trep Work for Good was established because during the pandemic, we did a ton of pro bono work,
Mhm.
saw the benefit of it, and I never want people to be priced out of what we can do.
That's really nice.
We have a Trep Work Good for Good platform where we're able to choose every quarter 2 engagements that we can help
That's great.
maximize their impact.
That's phenomenal, and it creates that cycle, the pay it forward cycle, I like to say,
100%.
which I absolutely love. I love doing it on an individual level, and I love doing it in the marketplace. It's very compelling. And so, Kevin, are there any other big goals or aspirations that you are currently working on accomplishing that we haven't talked about today?
Not really. I mean, continuing to lead and manage this growing firm and making sure that we're making the right choices in terms of the work that we're doing, I think is super, super important. I do want to complete the book and get that done on time, and have it be impactful and relevant.
Wonderful. Well, Kevin, I can't thank you enough for our conversation today. I think that business leaders and businesses can make a bigger difference in the marketplace if they just consider how they are impacting others and how they would like to impact others in a more significant way. Thank you so much for your time today, Kevin. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Transformational Thinkers with Sara Sheehan. My conversation with Kevin Wilkins is filled with interesting and remarkable insights. In today's episode, Kevin sheds light on the importance of intentionality in your life choices and shares his insights on fostering meaningful work that benefits the community. Here are 3 key takeaways from our discussion. First, intentional pathways. Kevin emphasizes the significance of making deliberate choices that align with personal values and the broader goal of making a positive impact. He discusses how younger generations are increasingly driven by the desire to contribute to societal good through their work. Second, philanthropic strategies in business. He encourages organizations to integrate philanthropic efforts into core values and align these initiatives with their vision. By focusing on the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, businesses can create lasting community impacts. This approach also enhances employee satisfaction, even when salaries might be lower. Third, focus on incremental progress in nonprofits. Kevin shares insights into how nonprofit work is often about incremental progress and coordination rather than solving all the problems outright. He talks about supporting culture bearers, addressing mental health in educational institutions, and tackling food insecurity through collaborative efforts. This episode is a must listen for anyone interested in creating a meaningful and sustainable non-profit business path, no matter what sector you're working in. If you want to make an impact on your community, you can do it. Tune in and explore Kevin's remarkable journey and his insights. Thanks so much for listening today. Subscribe and never miss an episode.